My name is Rachel Morgan. I'm 29 years old, and this is how I took revenge on the person who destroyed my life. I don't sugarcoat my story because pain doesn't need decoration. It leaves marks on your skin, on your chest, on the way your voice cracks when you talk about love. On the outside, I look composed now, makeup in place, hair neatly tied, a steady posture that says I survived. But inside, the scars don't fade. They whisper every night when the world is quiet. The first time I ever saw Ethan in a courtroom, I swear my heart stopped. He wasn't the man I remembered, the one who once swore I was his forever, who held me like the world would end if he let go. No, the Ethan standing there was a stranger in a tailored suit, his eyes scanning for sympathy, his lies polished to perfection. And me? I was sitting just a few feet away, the woman he had once promised to protect, now watching him answer for crimes that nearly swallowed me whole. Fraud, deception, betrayal so deep it ripped through the very ground I stood on. That was Ethan. He didn't just break my heart, he almost cost me everything: my home, my family's trust, my dignity. You know how people say heartbreak feels like drowning? That's a lie. Drowning would have been mercy. What Ethan did to me was slower, more deliberate. He tied weights to my ankles, one by one: financial lies, secret debts, betrayal after betrayal, and then watched as I struggled, gasping, sinking, begging for air that would never come. But I'm not the type to stay at the bottom. Everyone around me said the same thing: move on, Rachel, let it go, time heals. But time doesn't heal bullet wounds when the person who shot you is still walking free, smiling, pretending like he's innocent. No, time just teaches you how to hide the limp. I couldn't move on, not from him, not from the way he tried to bury me alive, leaving me gasping in the ruins of the life we built together. And so I made a choice. I wasn't going to forgive. I wasn't going to forget. I was going to bury him first. That's where my story really begins. I didn't grow up with much. My childhood was a patchwork quilt of small victories and constant struggle. My mother raised me and my younger brother, Adam, on her own in a small town in Ohio. She worked double shifts at the diner just to keep the lights on, and I grew up watching her stretch every dollar until it screamed. But here's the thing: what we lacked in money, my mom made up for in strength. She taught me that resilience wasn't just a trait, it was survival. If the world knocked you down, you got up, bruised but breathing, and you kept moving. That was the rule of our household. So when I met Ethan, I wasn't looking for someone to save me. I already knew how to save myself. What I didn't know was how dangerous it could be to let someone in. We met in college. I was 20, studying interior design, pulling long nights sketching layouts and building models, dreaming of someday opening my own studio. He was the kind of guy who lit up a room the second he walked in. Charismatic, confident, that dangerous mix of ambition and charm that made everyone lean in closer just to hear what he'd say next. Ethan was the man everyone loved. Professors admired him, friends trusted him, and me, I fell fast and hard. He swept me off my feet in ways I didn't even know were possible. Candlelit study sessions, surprise notes slipped into my textbooks, grand plans about our future whispered like promises I could hold in my hands. For a girl who had spent most of her life fighting for every scrap of stability, Ethan felt like a dream made flesh. It wasn't just me who adored him. My mom welcomed him like the son she never had. She said she could see the way he looked at me, like I was his whole world. Adam, who was 16 at the time, started shadowing Ethan, copying his confidence, his style, even the way he spoke. Ethan wasn't just my boyfriend. He was family, and I trusted him with everything. When I talked about opening my interior design studio, Ethan was the first one to say, "You'll do it. I'll help you." He encouraged me, pushed me, told me my dreams were too big to keep in the corner of a dorm room. And I believed him. Of course I did. After college, we moved into a little apartment together. It wasn't much, just two bedrooms with creaky floors and a view of a brick wall. But to me, it felt like our castle. We painted the walls ourselves, bought mismatched furniture, and built a life that felt solid. Shared bank accounts, shared bills, shared dreams. Then came the engagement. He got down on one knee in front of our friends at a Christmas party, with lights twinkling behind him and a ring that caught the glow of every star in the room. I said yes. Of course I said yes. Everyone clapped, people cried, and in that moment, it felt like the universe was finally giving me everything I had fought for my whole life. I wanted to believe he was my forever, my safe place, my reward for surviving all the battles before him, because that's what Ethan was to me. Not just a partner, not just a fiancé, but the foundation I was building my entire future on. Every plan, every dream, every decision, it all included him. And that's what makes betrayal cut deeper than any blade. It's not just about losing love, it's about losing yourself too. Because when someone is stitched into every corner of your life, tearing them out leaves you shredded. Back then, though, I didn't see it. I thought we were building something beautiful. I thought every brick we laid together was leading toward the life we both wanted. But the truth, Ethan wasn't building me up. He was setting me up to fall. The call came on a Thursday morning. I was sitting at my desk, sketching out design plans for a client's living room, when my phone buzzed. The number flashing on the screen belonged to my bank. At first, I thought it was routine. Maybe a question about a transaction, maybe an error, but the woman's voice on the other end was steady, practiced, the kind of calm you hear from someone trained to deliver bad news. "Miss Morgan," she said, "we're calling to confirm some recent withdrawals from your account." I frowned, grabbed a pen, ready to take notes. "Withdrawals? I haven't made any." There was a pause, then the sound of papers shuffling. "In the last 10 days, a series of transactions have cleared your savings. The balance is zero." Zero, I laughed, because what else can you do when someone tells you your future has just evaporated? "That's not possible. There must be a mistake." But it wasn't a mistake. My savings account was empty. My credit cards? Maxed out. My credit score? In ruins. And all of it was done under my name, with my signature on the documents. Only it wasn't my signature. It was Ethan's. The man I loved, the man I trusted, the man who had become part of my family, had forged my name, drained my accounts, and left me drowning in debt. I remember my hands shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. The room tilted, my chest tightened, and all I could think was, this isn't real. This can't be real. But reality doesn't care about your denial. It crushes you anyway. When Ethan came home that night, I confronted him. My voice cracked, tears burning down my face as I held the bank statements in my hands like proof of a nightmare I couldn't wake from. "How could you do this?" "Ethan, everything is gone. My savings, my cards, my business." My throat closed, the words choking me. "Why? Why would you do this to me?" He didn't flinch. He didn't apologize. He just looked at me with this cold detachment, as if I were a stranger interrupting his evening. "You'll survive," he said, his voice almost bored. "You always do." And then he walked out. No explanation, no remorse, no glance back at the woman whose life he had just detonated. Within weeks, the fallout hit me like a tsunami. The apartment was gone. I couldn't make rent. Clients pulled away, whispering about financial irresponsibility, about how maybe I wasn't as stable or professional as I seemed. The little business I had poured my heart into crumbled in my hands, and the whispers didn't stop there. People in our community, people who had once congratulated us on our engagement, now pointed fingers at me. How could she be so stupid? How could she not see where it coming? Stupid. That's what they called me. Meanwhile, Ethan, he thrived. He moved on like nothing happened. New clothes, new car, new woman on his arm. He smiled in public, shook hands, posted pictures of his amazing new chapter. Everywhere I turned, there he was, untouched, untarnished, while I was left in ashes. And that's when something in me broke. That night, lying on the floor of my mother's living room, staring up at the ceiling because I no longer had a bed to call my own, I felt the shift. The Rachel who trusted too much, who believed in promises and second chances, that girl died that night. What rose in her place was someone harder, someone sharper, someone who understood that survival wasn't enough anymore. I wasn't going to let Ethan Morgan ruin me. No, I was going to ruin him. People like to talk about starting over as if it's this clean, brave process, as if you just pack up your pain, toss it in the trash, and walk toward the sunrise. But no one ever talks about how it really feels. Starting over isn't beautiful, it's humiliating. It's sitting on a friend's couch, clutching a trash bag filled with the few clothes you could carry, pretending you're fine while your stomach twists with shame. That was me. After Ethan walked out, I didn't just lose money. I lost everything: my apartment, my independence, my reputation. I picked up extra jobs, bartending, cleaning offices at night, even babysitting for neighbors, anything to scrape together enough to keep the lights on in the wreckage of my life. By day, I tried to smile, tried to convince the world I was still standing. By night, I collapsed. Some nights, I'd cry until my chest physically hurt. Other nights, I'd lie awake, frozen in the dark, replaying Ethan's voice in my head. You'll survive. You always do. But the survival he mocked me with, that became my fuel. Because survival wasn't enough anymore. I wanted justice. No, if I'm honest, I wanted revenge. The humiliation deepened when I learned Ethan wasn't content with just destroying me financially. No, he wanted to bury me socially too. I heard from mutual acquaintances that Ethan was spinning his version of the story, that I had been unstable, reckless with money, obsessed with controlling him. According to him, I drained our accounts. I tanked our future, and he, poor, noble Ethan, had no choice but to walk away. And the worst part? People believed him. Friends I had laughed with, celebrated with, planned weddings with, they turned their backs. They whispered. They avoided my calls. They looked at me with pity, or worse, with suspicion. That was the knife that twisted deepest. Betrayal doesn't just come from the one who hurts you directly. It comes from the silence of everyone else who chooses to believe their lies. I thought about disappearing. I thought about packing a bag, running to another city, changing my name, and leaving all of this behind. Sometimes the weight of humiliation felt so crushing that vanishing seemed like mercy. But rage is a stubborn thing. It doesn't let you disappear. Instead, it pushes you to fight. So I fought. Quietly at first. Secretly. I started researching fraud laws. At night, after shifts at the bar, I sat hunched over a laptop, scrolling through legal forums, reading state statutes, trying to understand exactly what Ethan had done to me. The words blurred, the language was complicated, but I kept going because knowledge felt like power. And power was the one thing I didn't have anymore, at least not yet. I dug through everything he'd ever touched: old emails, bank statements, signed documents. I traced his handwriting, compared it to mine, looking for proof of forgery. Every detail became a puzzle piece. Every file was a weapon I was slowly sharpening. And I wasn't alone. One night, exhausted, I confided in my younger brother Adam. He was older now, tougher, with that protective edge brothers get when they see their sister broken. I told him everything: the money, the lies, the forgeries, the whispers. He didn't hesitate. He just looked at me and said, "Then fight back. Don't let him win." It was the push I needed. Not long after, I reconnected with Julia, an old college friend who worked in finance. I hadn't wanted to drag her into my mess, but when she heard even a fraction of what Ethan had done, she insisted on helping. She walked me through credit reports, explained how to trace suspicious accounts, even flagged transactions that linked Ethan to things he thought he had hidden. Piece by piece, the picture became clearer. Ethan wasn't just careless, he was calculated. He was laundering money through fake business accounts, shifting funds, forging names. Mine wasn't the only signature he had copied. The psychological toll nearly broke me. There were nights I'd wake up shaking, drenched in sweat, convinced I was still drowning in debt I'd never escape. I had panic attacks, so violent I couldn't breathe. My chest would lock, my hands would claw at my throat, and all I could hear was his voice. "You'll survive. You always do." But slowly, I changed. Every panic attack became a drill in endurance. Every night of crying became a release that hardened me for the next day. I started to see my pain not as weakness, but as fire. Fire that could burn him if I learned to control it. I wasn't the same woman Ethan left broken on the floor. I was sharpening myself into a weapon. And once I had enough evidence, enough strength, enough rage forged into something usable, I began to build a plan. I didn't want to just confront Ethan. That would have been too easy, too small. I wanted to strip away everything he valued: his reputation, his wealth, his image of success. I wanted the world to see him for what he truly was: a liar, a fraud, a predator. So my plan had two sides: public and legal. Legally, I would gather enough evidence to drag him into court, to make sure his crimes were documented and undeniable. Publicly, I would expose him, so that the same people who once clapped for our engagement, who once praised his charm, would now turn their backs on him the way they had on me. I wasn't just going to survive him, I was going to destroy him. Filing the lawsuit felt like lighting a match in a room full of gasoline. For months, I'd collected evidence, stitched together every forged signature, every suspicious transaction, every email that reeked of Ethan's arrogance. And when I finally slid that thick folder across the lawyer's desk, I felt the first true flicker of power I'd had in a long time. The case was set. Ethan Morgan versus Rachel Morgan. Fraud, forgery, deception. The morning of the trial, I stood in front of the courthouse, my palms damp, my knees trembling. To the outside world, I probably looked composed, hair pinned back, dark blazer pressed neat. But inside, my heart was pounding like war drums. I wasn't just walking into a courtroom. I was walking into a battlefield. And then there he was, Ethan. He walked in like he owned the place, flashing that same smile that had once charmed professors and neighbors and even my mother. He glanced at me as if I were insignificant, like a nuisance to swat away. His smirk said it all. "You can't touch me." For most of the trial, it almost seemed like he was right. His lawyer spun stories about my supposed emotional instability, about how I had mismanaged money and was trying to frame Ethan out of bitterness. Ethan leaned back in his chair, confident, occasionally throwing me these little mocking smiles as if to say, "See, no one will ever believe you." And the truth was, I was scared, terrified even. What if the evidence wasn't enough? What if the signatures, the documents, the bank statements, all of it could still be twisted to make me look like the fool? But I had something Ethan didn't know about. Months earlier, when the devastation was still fresh, I had called him, desperate, begging for answers, and in his arrogance, in that need to flex his power one last time, Ethan had said the words that would become the nail in his coffin. He admitted it, on the phone. He laughed and said how easy it had been to forge my name, how stupid I was to trust him, how I'd never be able to prove a thing, and I had recorded it. That recording was my weapon, the blade I had been sharpening in silence. When my lawyer asked permission to submit new evidence, Ethan frowned for the first time. When the judge allowed it, the air in the courtroom shifted, and when the recording began to play, the entire room froze. His voice echoed, clear and cruel. "Of course I forged her name. Rachel's too naive to even notice until it's too late. She'll survive. She always does." The silence afterward was deafening. I looked at Ethan, and for the first time he wasn't smiling. His face went pale, his jaw tightened, his lawyer scrambled, stuttering objections that went nowhere. The judge's expression hardened, his eyes narrowing at Ethan as if the verdict was already sealed. And me? I sat tall, calm, cold. I locked eyes with him, and in that moment, everything shifted. For years, Ethan had held the power. He had been the one in control, pulling strings, spinning lies, walking away while I crumbled. But here, now, in this courtroom, the power was mine. For the first time, Ethan wasn't in control. I was. The trial unraveled quickly after that. The jury didn't need hours of deliberation. The evidence was undeniable. Ethan Morgan was guilty of fraud, of forgery, of the kind of arrogance that makes men believe they're untouchable until the ground caves beneath them. The sentence was harsh. Prison time, fines that stripped him of the wealth he'd paraded, his career gone overnight, his reputation shredded in headlines that called him a con man, a manipulator, a disgrace. As the gavel struck, I felt something inside me release. Not joy, not even relief. It was deeper than that. It was reclamation. He had tried to bury me alive, but I had climbed out of the grave he dug and dragged him into it instead. When they led him away in handcuffs, Ethan glanced back at me. No smirk, no arrogance, just fear. And that was the moment I knew my revenge wasn't just legal, it was psychological. He would rot knowing the one person he underestimated, the one he mocked as weak, was the one who destroyed him. And I didn't even have to lift a finger. I just told the truth. When the trial ended, people asked me if I felt victorious. They wanted me to say I was overjoyed, that I was dancing on the ashes of the man who betrayed me. But the truth, victory doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels quieter, heavier. It feels like walking out of a courthouse with your head high, but your body still trembling because you can't quite believe you made it through. The months after Ethan's sentencing were strange. For so long, my life had revolved around the wreckage he left behind. And suddenly, he was gone, locked away, stripped of the power he once lorded over me. And for the first time in years, the silence around me wasn't suffocating. It was peaceful. Rebuilding didn't happen overnight. It was slow, sometimes painfully so. I started small, renting a tiny office space with chipped paint and a leaky ceiling, the kind of place no one else wanted. But to me, it was freedom. I poured myself into it, one wall, one piece of furniture, one design at a time. That office became the birthplace of my dream, my interior design studio. I remember hanging the sign on the door for the first time. My name, my business, mine. No one else's signature, no one else's control. Just me, standing on my own 2 feet. For the first time since Ethan, I felt independent, whole. Healing came in fragments. There were nights I still woke from nightmares, heart racing, reaching for a man who wasn't there. There were days I'd catch whispers on the street, people still gossiping, still judging. But I stopped caring because scars don't vanish. They don't fade into nothing. They stay, they burn, they remind you, but they also tell the truth. I survived. My mom was there every step of the way. She never once said, I told you so, even though she had every right to. Instead, she hugged me tighter, told me how proud she was that I hadn't stayed down when life tried to crush me. Adam, my brother, came to my office opening, wearing a suit 2 sizes too big, grinning like it was his victory too. And maybe it was, because survival isn't just a solo act. Sometimes it takes the people who love you to remind you of who you are when you can't remember yourself. Revenge didn't erase the pain Ethan caused. Nothing ever could. But it gave me something else: closure, control, power. For once, I wasn't the victim of his story. I had written the ending myself. Looking back, I barely recognized the girl I used to be. The girl who trusted too easily, who believed charm meant character, who thought love was enough to build a future on. She's gone. In her place stands a woman who knows better, a woman who is resilient, unshakable, a woman who doesn't wait for mercy. She makes her own justice. And when I walk into my studio every morning, sunlight spilling across the floor, I don't just see paint swatches and furniture plans. I see proof. Proof that he didn't bury me. Proof that I climbed out, scarred but stronger. My name is Rachel Morgan. I'm 29 years old. And I'm not just a survivor. I'm a builder. And I built a life he can never touch again. They thought breaking me would keep me small. They thought stripping me of my money, my dignity, my future would leave me crawling, begging, silent. But pain doesn't shrink you. Pain sharpens you. It strips away the softness, the illusions, the blind trust. It forges you into something harder, something unshakable. And that's what happened to me. I'm not the girl they left in pieces anymore. I'm not the woman crying on the floor, begging for answers from someone who was never capable of giving them. That girl is gone. I'm the woman who built herself back taller, stronger, louder. When I look back now, I don't see a tragedy. I see a rebirth. I see the moment I stopped letting other people write my story. I see the moment I learned that sometimes survival isn't about forgiveness. It's about fire. And Ethan, he'll never understand that kind of strength because people like him only know how to take, never how to rebuild. He thought he destroyed me. Instead, he created a version of me he could never touch, never control, never silence. And if you're watching this, wondering if revenge is worth it, remember this: forgiveness is mercy, and mercy is something I only give to people who deserve it.